The wine glass trembled in Rory's manicured fingers as she stood center stage at the company gala, her voice cutting through the elegant chatter like a blade through silk. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward us, and I felt the familiar weight of public scrutiny settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. "From now on, I decide when we talk, Beck," she announced, her voice carrying that particular tone she reserved for maximum damage. "Stop chasing me around like some lost puppy." The crowd gasped collectively, a sound that seemed to echo off the crystal chandeliers hanging above us. Camera phones emerged from purses and jacket pockets, capturing what would undoubtedly become the evening's entertainment. I stood there, my cheap rental tuxedo suddenly feeling even more out of place among the designer suits and evening gowns that surrounded us. Wesley Lorne smirked at me from his position near the bar, raising his whiskey glass in a mock toast. The junior executive had always struck me as the type who peaked in high school, desperately clinging to any perceived victory over men he considered beneath him. Tonight, he was getting quite a show. "Well," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions swirling in my chest, "I guess that settles that." Rory's eyes flashed with what I recognized as disappointment. She had expected tears, maybe pleading, certainly not the calm acceptance I was displaying. The crowd waited for drama, for the construction worker turned project manager to make a scene worthy of their gossip circles. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the exit, noting every face that turned to watch my departure. Mrs. Henderson from accounting looked genuinely sympathetic. Dave from marketing couldn't hide his grin. Val, Rory's best friend and constant enabler, was already typing furiously on her phone, no doubt spreading the news to anyone who had missed the live performance. The cool October air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I allowed myself one deep breath before heading to my truck. 23 years of marriage reduced to a public spectacle for the entertainment of people who barely knew our names. The drive home gave me time to think, really think, for the first time in months. The signs had been there, scattered like breadcrumbs leading to this inevitable moment. The late nights at the office that stretched later each week, the mysterious business trips that seemed to multiply, the way she had started looking at me like I was an inconvenience rather than her husband. Our house sat dark and empty when I arrived, a modest colonial that we had bought together when we still believed in forever. I went straight to our home office and powered up the computer, my fingers moving with surprising steadiness as I accessed our joint accounts. Transfer, transfer, transfer. Every shared penny moved into accounts bearing only my name. Credit cards canceled with efficient clicks, passwords changed with methodical precision. By the time I heard Rory's car in the driveway, I had effectively cut off her access to everything we had built together. She stormed through the front door like a hurricane making landfall, her designer dress rustling with each angry step. "What the heck was that supposed to accomplish?" she demanded, throwing her purse onto the coffee table with enough force to rattle the decorative bowl my mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. I looked up from my laptop, meeting her furious gaze with calm indifference. "Just evening the playing field." "Playing field? Beck, this isn't a game." "Isn't it?" I closed the laptop with deliberate slowness. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been playing for quite some time. I'm just learning the rules." Her face flushed, and for a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across her features. Rory had always been skilled at reading people, at knowing exactly which buttons to push to get the reaction she wanted. My unexpected composure was throwing off her game plan. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "I know enough." I stood and walked past her toward the stairs. "Your move, Rory." I was halfway up when I heard her purse hit the floor, contents scattering across the hardwood. Among the usual debris of modern life, something caught my eye. A second phone, smaller than her usual device, had slid partially under the couch. Rory scrambled to collect her scattered belongings, but I was faster. The phone felt warm in my hand, recently used. The screen lit up at my touch, revealing a string of text messages that made my stomach clench. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last night was incredible. Beck's working late again. Perfect timing. He's so clueless. Makes this even more exciting. The photos that followed painted a picture I had suspected but never wanted to confirm. Rory and Wesley, tangled together in what was clearly a hotel room, their faces flushed with passion and something else. Something that looked suspiciously like contempt. Give me that. Rory lunged for the phone, but I held it out of reach. Interesting reading material, I said, scrolling through months of messages. Very educational. Beck, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been playing house with junior executive Wesley while I've been working 60-hour weeks to pay for your lifestyle? Or maybe you'd like to explain these charming little comments about how pathetic I am. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but they struck me as calculated rather than genuine. Rory had always been talented at producing tears when they served her purposes. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I pocketed the phone, ignoring her protests. And now we both know where we stand. That night I lay in the guest bedroom staring at the ceiling, my mind working through possibilities like a chess player considering his next dozen moves. Rory had humiliated me publicly, systematically destroyed our marriage, and apparently found the whole thing amusing enough to share intimate details with her lover. She wanted to play games. Fine. I had been underestimated my entire life, dismissed as just another blue-collar worker who got lucky. People like Rory and Wesley saw guys like me as stepping stones, useful, until something better came along. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat in my office reviewing the weekend's revelations. The second phone had provided a treasure trove of information about Rory's extracurricular activities, hotel receipts, restaurant reservations, even GPS coordinates that painted a detailed picture of her deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Marty, my old construction foreman and one of the few people I trusted completely. Heard about Saturday night. You okay? I typed back quickly. Meet me at Murphy's tonight. Need to talk. Murphy's bar occupied the kind of building that had seen better decades, tucked between a laundromat and a check-cashing place on the wrong side of town. The clientele consisted mainly of working men who came to drink beer, watch sports, and complain about their various troubles without judgment. Marty was already there when I arrived, his weathered hands wrapped around a bottle of beer. At 55, he had the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by very little. We had worked together for 8 years before I moved into project management, and he remained one of the most reliable people I knew. Rough weekend? He asked as I slid into the booth across from him. You could say that. I signaled the bartender for a beer. Rory decided to make our marital problems public entertainment. Heard something about that from my wife. She was at the gala with her book club friends. Marty shook his head. What's your plan? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I need a favor. Nothing illegal, but definitely not something I can do alone. Marty's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of favor? I explained about the second phone, the messages, the systematic humiliation I had endured. Marty listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. So what do you need? He asked when I finished. Rory's car is still at the country club. She rode home with Wesley Saturday night, and I'm sure she's expecting me to play the dutiful husband and retrieve it for her. I smiled grimly. I have a different idea. The next morning I called in sick to work and met Marty at the country club parking lot. Rory's silver sedan sat alone in the far corner, abandoned and forlorn. I used my spare key to start the engine while Marty kept watch. "This feels too easy," Marty muttered, scanning the empty parking lot. "Sometimes the best plans are the simple ones." I connected my laptop to the car's diagnostic port, accessing the GPS system. Just need to make a few adjustments to the tracking history. Within minutes, I had downloaded every location the car had visited over the past 6 months. Hotels, restaurants, Wesley's apartment complex, even a few places I didn't recognize. The data painted a comprehensive picture of Rory's secret life. But I wasn't finished. Using skills I had learned during my brief stint in the Army, I installed a small tracking device under the dashboard, invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. "What now?" Marty asked as I closed the hood. "Now we wait, and we prepare for Phase 2. That evening, Mrs. Dalrymple knocked on my door carrying a casserole and wearing the expression of someone bursting with gossip. My elderly neighbor had lived on our street for 40 years and maintained a network of information that would make the CIA envious. "Beck, dear, I brought you some dinner. Figured you might not be up for cooking after everything." "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Dalrymple. Would you like to come in for coffee?" She accepted eagerly, settling into our living room with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver important news. "I probably shouldn't say anything," she began, which meant she absolutely intended to say everything. "But I saw Rory last Thursday afternoon at the Riverside Motel, with that young man from her office." The Riverside Motel was the kind of establishment that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. It sat on the outskirts of town, convenient for people who wanted privacy and didn't care about luxury. "They weren't very subtle about it," Mrs. Dalrymple continued, warming to her subject. "Kissing right there in the parking lot like teenagers. I was driving by on my way to the pharmacy and nearly ran off the road." "I appreciate you telling me," I said carefully. "There's more." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "I've seen them there 3 times in the past month. Always the same room, always the same time, 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoons." After Mrs. Dalrymple left, I sat in my kitchen eating her casserole and planning my next move. Thursday was 2 days away, and I had some preparations to make. I called Marty again. "Remember that BMW Wesley drives? The one he's so proud of? The red one?" "Yeah, what about it? How would you feel about a little automotive improvement project?" Wednesday night found us in the office parking garage, armed with supplies from Marty's workshop. Wesley's BMW sat in its reserved spot, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a monument to his ego. "You sure about this?" Marty asked, glancing around nervously. "Absolutely." I knelt beside the car, examining the tires. He humiliated me in public. Time to return the favor. We worked quickly and efficiently, a small puncture in the rear tire, carefully placed to cause a slow leak rather than immediate failure. Sugar in the gas tank was a myth, but a handful of mothballs would create some interesting engine problems. And the pièce de résistance, a package of frozen fish carefully placed under the driver's seat where it would thaw and create an unforgettable aroma. "This is juvenile," Marty observed, but he was grinning as he said it. Sometimes juvenile is exactly what the situation calls for. Thursday afternoon, I positioned myself at a coffee shop across from the Riverside Motel with a clear view of the parking lot. At exactly 2 o'clock, Rory's sedan pulled in, followed moments later by Wesley's BMW. They emerged from their respective cars and embraced passionately, completely oblivious to their surroundings. Wesley spun Rory around like they were starring in a romantic movie, both of them laughing with the giddy excitement of forbidden love. I took several photos with my phone, making sure to capture their faces clearly. Then I settled back to wait for the show to begin. It took about an hour. Wesley emerged from the motel room first, straightening his tie and checking his watch. He walked to his BMW with the swagger of a man who thought he had the world figured out. The car started normally, but I could see Wesley's confusion as he noticed the flat tire. He got out, walked around the vehicle, and I could practically hear his cursing from across the street. When he opened the hood and the smell hit him, his reaction was everything I had hoped for. Wesley stumbled backward, gagging and covering his nose with his sleeve. Other motel patrons began to stare as the odor spread across the parking lot. Rory appeared at the motel room door, drawn by the commotion, and I captured the moment when she realized what was happening. The tow truck arrived 20 minutes later, and I watched with satisfaction as Wesley's pride and joy was loaded onto the flatbed. Rory had to call a taxi, and I could see her agitation from across the street as she paced back and forth, gesturing angrily at her phone. That evening, I received a furious call from Rory. "My credit cards aren't working," she announced without preamble. "That's unfortunate," I replied calmly. "Beck, this is ridiculous. I need access to our accounts." "Our accounts?" I wasn't aware we still had any joint accounts. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When she spoke again, her voice was tight with controlled rage. "What do you want?" "I want a lot of things, Rory. But mostly, I want you to understand that actions have consequences. This is childish. Maybe. But it's effective." I hung up before she could respond, feeling more satisfaction than I had experienced in months. The game was just beginning, and I was finally playing to win. Friday morning brought the first signs that Rory was regrouping for a counterattack. I arrived at the office to find several of my colleagues treating me with unusual coolness, their conversations stopping abruptly when I entered the break room. Janet from Human Resources appeared at my cubicle around 10 o'clock, wearing the carefully neutral expression that meant trouble. "Beck, could I see you in my office for a few minutes?" The HR office smelled like vanilla air freshener and impending doom. Janet settled behind her desk with a stack of papers that looked ominous. "I've received some concerns about your recent behavior," she began carefully. "Nothing formal yet, but I wanted to give you a chance to address them before things escalate." "What kind of concerns?" "Reports that you've been making threatening statements about coworkers, specifically about Wesley Lorne from the marketing department." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was impressed by Rory's speed. She had managed to launch a preemptive strike before I even got to work. "I haven't made any threats against Wesley or anyone else," I said truthfully. "There are also concerns about your emotional stability following your personal difficulties. Some people feel uncomfortable around you." "Some people or one specific person who happens to have influence in this company?" Janet's slight wince told me I had hit the target. "Beck, I'm trying to help you here. Maybe you should consider taking some personal time to deal with your situation at home." "I appreciate your concern, Janet, but I'm perfectly capable of separating my personal and professional life." After leaving Janet's office, I made a detour to the marketing department. Wesley sat at his desk, looking frustrated as he spoke into his phone. "No, I don't know what caused the smell. Just get it fixed." "What do you mean 3 days? This is ridiculous." He looked up as I approached, and I saw wariness flicker across his features. "Wesley," I said pleasantly. "Car trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle." His voice carried a forced confidence that didn't quite mask his nervousness. "That's the spirit. Sometimes life throws us curveballs, but we adapt, right?" "Right." He was studying my face, trying to read my intentions. "By the way, how's your Thursday afternoon project coming along? The one at the Riverside?" The color drained from Wesley's face, and his phone slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." I smiled and patted his shoulder in a gesture that could have been friendly or threatening, depending on interpretation. "Have a great day, Wesley." That afternoon, I received an unexpected ally in the form of Talia Morrison, Rory's primary rival in the corporate hierarchy. Talia was ambitious, intelligent, and had been waiting years for an opportunity to advance past Rory's carefully maintained position. She approached me in the parking lot as I was leaving work, her expression businesslike and direct. "I heard about your wife's campaign against you," she said without preamble. "Word travels fast around here." "It does when someone is actively spreading it." Talia glanced around to ensure we weren't overheard. "Rory's been working the phones all day, calling in favors and painting you as unstable." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think she's overplaying her hand, and I think you might have information that could be useful to both of us." I studied Talia's face, recognizing the calculating intelligence that had made her successful in corporate politics. "What kind of information?" "The kind that shows how Rory has been abusing company resources for personal gain. Expense reports for hotels that weren't business-related, company car used for unauthorized trips, that sort of thing." "And what would you do with such information?" "Present it to the board as evidence that certain employees have been violating company policy." Talia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Purely in the interest of corporate integrity, of course." That evening, I spent several hours preparing a comprehensive dossier of Rory's activities. The GPS data from her car, cross-referenced with her expense reports and calendar entries, painted a damning picture of systematic deception. Hotel bills submitted as business expenses that corresponded exactly with her meetings at the Riverside Motel. Mileage claims for trips that led directly to Wesley's apartment complex. I packaged everything neatly and sent it to Talia's personal email address, then sat back to wait for the fireworks. Saturday brought the annual Harvest Festival, a town-wide celebration that drew crowds from throughout the county. Normally, Rory and I would have attended together, working the various booths and socializing with our neighbors. This year, I went alone. The festival occupied the entire downtown square, with vendor booths, carnival games, and a small stage where local bands performed throughout the day. The smell of funnel cakes and barbecue filled the air, and children ran between the attractions with the boundless energy of sugar and excitement. I was examining handmade crafts at one of the booths when I spotted Rory and Wesley near the beer garden, standing closer together than mere colleagues should. They were trying to maintain the appearance of casual friendship, but their body language told a different story. Wesley had his hand on Rory's lower back, a gesture of intimacy that several people around them were clearly noticing. Mrs. Henderson from my office stood nearby with her husband, and I could see her whispering behind her hand as she observed the couple. I purchased a large soft drink and began walking in their direction, timing my approach for maximum impact. Wesley saw me coming first, and I watched him whisper urgently in Rory's ear. She turned, her face hardening when she spotted me. "Beck?" she said coolly as I approached. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Wouldn't miss it. Great turnout this year." I took a sip of my drink, noting how Wesley had subtly moved away from Rory. "Wesley, good to see you again. How's the car situation?" "Getting resolved," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Glad to hear it. You know, it's funny how these mechanical problems just seem to come out of nowhere." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Almost like someone's trying to send a message." Wesley's face flushed red. "Are you threatening me?" "Threatening? Wesley, I'm just making conversation about automotive maintenance." I smiled innocently, though I suppose guilty consciences can make people paranoid. Guilty conscience? What's that supposed to mean? The conversation was attracting attention from nearby festival goers, exactly as I had intended. Rory recognized the developing situation and tried to defuse it. "Beck, please, not here." "Not here what?" "I'm just catching up with my wife and her colleague." Wesley's temper finally snapped. "Your wife doesn't want to talk to you. Can't you take a hint?" "Actually, Wesley, I think my wife has been sending me plenty of hints. Very clear ones, in fact." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the photos from Thursday afternoon. "Want to see?" Wesley lunged for the phone, but I was ready for him. I stepped aside smoothly, and his momentum carried him straight into the beer garden's decorative fountain. He hit the water with a splash that soaked several nearby spectators and sent a flock of decorative ducks scattering in panic. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, thinking Wesley's dunking was part of some elaborate festival entertainment. Someone started filming with their phone, and I heard multiple people calling friends to come witness the spectacle. Wesley emerged from the fountain dripping wet and furious, his expensive shirt clinging to his body and his carefully styled hair plastered to his skull. He looked like a drowned rat, and the comparison wasn't lost on the amused crowd. "You piece of—" Wesley started toward me, but Marty appeared from nowhere and placed a restraining hand on his chest. "Easy there, hotshot. Festival's supposed to be family-friendly." Rory stood frozen, watching her lover's humiliation with growing horror. She could see her carefully constructed image crumbling as phones captured every moment of the disaster. "This isn't over," Wesley snarled as he pushed past the crowd toward the parking area. "No," I agreed, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "I don't think it is." Monday morning brought swift retaliation. I arrived at the office to find my access card deactivated and a security guard waiting at the front desk. "Mr. Darren, I need to escort you to Human Resources." The walk through the office felt like a perp walk, with curious colleagues craning their necks to watch my passage. Janet waited in her office with a man I didn't recognize, wearing the kind of suit that suggested legal authority. "Beck, this is Tom Harrison from our legal department. We need to discuss some serious allegations that have been brought to our attention." I took the offered chair, maintaining outward calm despite the churning in my stomach. "What kind of allegations?" Harrison opened a thick folder. "Harassment, threatening behavior, and stalking. Wesley Lorne has filed a formal complaint claiming you've been following him, vandalizing his property, and making verbal threats." "That's interesting. What evidence does he have?" "Witnesses saw you approach him aggressively at the Harvest Festival. There's video of you causing him to fall into the fountain." "Video of me stepping aside when he lunged at me, you mean? Self-defense isn't harassment." Janet leaned forward. "Beck, there's also the matter of your wife's concerns. She's reported that you've been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior at home." "My wife has been having an affair with Wesley Lorne for months. I'd say that affects her credibility as a witness." The room fell silent. Harrison and Janet exchanged glances, and I could see them recalculating the situation. "Do you have proof of this alleged affair?" Harrison asked carefully. "Extensive proof. Photos, text messages, GPS records, hotel receipts. Would you like to see them?" Before they could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Talia. "Board meeting moved to this afternoon. Big announcement coming." "Actually," I said, standing up, "I think this conversation might be premature. You might want to wait until after today's board meeting before making any decisions about my employment." I left them looking confused and walked out of the building, my access card still deactivated, but my confidence intact. Phase 3 was about to begin. That afternoon, I positioned myself at a coffee shop across from the office building with a clear view of the executive parking area. At exactly 3:30, I watched Wesley emerge from the building moving fast, his face flushed with panic. He fumbled with his phone as he walked, nearly dropping it twice before managing to make a call. Even from across the street, I could see his agitation as he gestured wildly during the conversation. 20 minutes later, Rory's sedan peeled out of the parking garage, tires squealing as she took the corner too fast. I followed at a discreet distance, curious to see where this emergency meeting would take place. They ended up at the construction site where I had worked with Marty years earlier. The location was isolated, surrounded by half-finished buildings and heavy machinery that sat silent in the late afternoon sun. Perfect for a private conversation that they didn't want overheard. I parked behind a concrete barrier and made my way closer on foot, using the machinery as cover. Wesley was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, while Rory sat on a stack of lumber, her head in her hands. "This is a disaster," Wesley was saying. "Talia had everything. Bank records, GPS logs, expense reports. She made me look like an idiot in front of the entire board." "What did they say?" Rory's voice was muffled but audible. "Suspended pending investigation. My career is over, Rory. Finished. We can fix this. We just need to think." "Fix this? How exactly do we fix this? Your husband has been playing us like amateurs." I smiled grimly from my hiding spot behind a bulldozer. It was gratifying to finally get some recognition for my efforts. "Beck's not that smart," Rory said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Really? Then explain how he managed to document every meeting we've had for the past 6 months. Explain how he knew about the motel. Explain how he turned my own company against me." Wesley kicked a piece of concrete, sending it skittering across the construction site. "We need to go on offense. Make him back down." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we make him understand that he's messing with the wrong people." I had heard enough. As Wesley continued his rant, I quietly circled around behind him, using the construction equipment to mask my approach. When I was close enough, I cleared my throat. "Afternoon, folks. Nice day for a private meeting." Wesley spun around so fast he nearly lost his balance. Rory jumped to her feet, her face going pale when she saw me. "Beck, what are you doing here?" "Just enjoying the scenery. You know, I used to work this site. Built most of these foundations with my own hands." I gestured at the surrounding construction. "Brings back memories." Wesley had recovered from his initial shock and was trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "You're trespassing." "Actually, I still have friends who work here. They don't mind me visiting." I pulled out my phone and showed them the recording app that had been running. "Hope you don't mind that I captured your little strategy session." "You can't record us without permission," Wesley sputtered. "Funny thing about that. In this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation, and since I'm a party to this conversation now, we're all good legally." Rory stood up slowly, her corporate training kicking in as she tried to regain control of the situation. "What do you want, Beck?" "I want you to understand that you're not as clever as you think you are. I want Wesley here to realize that actions have consequences, and mostly, I want you both to know that this is far from over." Wesley's face was turning red with anger and frustration. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Well, we've got news for you. We know about your little sabotage games, the car, the fountain, all of it. We're going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Tell everyone how the construction worker outsmarted the college graduates. I'm sure that story will reflect well on both of you." "This is harassment," Rory said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, this is justice. Harassment would be if I started spreading around some of those more intimate photos from your phone, the ones where you're discussing how pathetic and clueless I am." Both of them went silent, finally understanding the full scope of what I had discovered. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to stop trying to sabotage my career. You're going to stop spreading lies about my mental state, and you're going to accept that your little secret is no longer secret." "And if we don't?" Wesley asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then those photos and text messages get shared with a much wider audience. Your wife might find them particularly interesting, Wesley. And Rory, I'm sure your parents would love to see how their daughter really spends her business trips." I turned to leave, then paused for one final observation. "Oh, and Wesley, you might want to check your employment status. I heard through the grapevine that the board meeting didn't go well for you." As I walked away, I could hear them arguing behind me, their voices rising in panic and recrimination. The hunter had become the hunted, and they were finally beginning to understand what that felt like. The next morning brought confirmation that Talia's presentation to the board had achieved its intended effect. Wesley's suspension had become termination, and Rory was facing a formal investigation into her expense account irregularities. I was reinstated at work with a formal apology from HR, though Janet's expression suggested she was less than thrilled about the reversal. The office atmosphere had shifted dramatically, with colleagues who had shunned me on Monday now offering cautious smiles and coffee invitations. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, Wesley's voice came through the speaker, tight with desperation. "We need to talk. Just the three of us. No games, no recordings, no tricks." "I'm listening." "The Riverside Motel, room 12, 8 o'clock tonight. We'll discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "For ending this thing before it destroys all of us." I considered the offer. The Riverside Motel held poetic justice as a meeting place, and I was curious to see what kind of deal they thought they could offer. "I'll be there." Room 12 at the Riverside Motel was exactly what I expected. Faded carpet, questionable stains on the walls, and the lingering aroma of industrial disinfectant fighting a losing battle against decades of questionable activities. Rory sat on the edge of the bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had seen her in years. Wesley paced by the window, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. "Okay," Wesley said as soon as I entered. "Here's the situation. We all have something to lose here. You want revenge, we want our lives back. There has to be a middle ground." "I'm listening." Rory spoke for the first time. "We're prepared to offer you a generous settlement, enough money to start over somewhere else, no contest divorce, clean break for everyone." "How generous?" 200,000, Wesley said quickly. "Cash. Untraceable." I almost laughed. "Where exactly would you get 200,000 in cash, Wesley? Last I heard you were unemployed." "I have resources. Family money." "Ah, yes. The family money you've been bragging about for years. The same family money that's tied up in trusts you can't access until you're 40. Wesley's face went red. "How do you know about that?" "I know a lot of things, Wesley. For instance, I know that you've been lying to Rory about your financial situation just like you've been lying to everyone else." I turned to Rory. "Did you know that your boyfriend here has been living on credit cards and student loans? That fancy apartment, the expensive car, the designer clothes, it's all borrowed money." Rory stared at Wesley in shock. "Is that true?" "It's complicated," Wesley muttered. "No, it's simple. You're broke, unemployed, and about to be exposed as a fraud." I sat down in the room's single chair. "So, let's talk about what you can actually offer me." "What do you want?" Rory asked quietly. "I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to feel what I felt when you humiliated me in front of everyone we know. I want you to experience the consequences of your choices. We get it, okay? We messed up. We hurt you. But this has gone far enough." "Has it?" "Because from where I sit, you're just getting started on your journey of consequences." Wesley stopped pacing and faced me directly. "What if we made a public apology, admitted what we did, cleared your name completely?" "Interesting. Where would this public apology take place?" "Wherever you want. The office, the country club, downtown during the lunch rush." I pretended to consider this offer while secretly marveling at their desperation. They were willing to humiliate themselves publicly just to make this stop, which told me everything I needed to know about how effective my campaign had been. "You know what?" I said finally. "I think I have a better idea." Before they could respond, I pulled out my phone and sent a pre-written text message. Within seconds, I heard car doors slamming in the parking lot outside. "What did you just do?" Rory demanded. "I invited some friends to join our little negotiation session." The door burst open, and Marty entered, followed by Mrs. Dalrymple, Talia, and 3 other people I had carefully selected for maximum impact. Val, Rory's former best friend, started filming immediately with her phone. "What is this?" Wesley backed against the wall, looking like a trapped animal. "This is your public apology," I said calmly. "Right here, right now, in front of witnesses who represent every aspect of your social and professional lives. Rory understood first. You planned this. The whole meeting was a setup. Of course it was. Did you really think I would come here alone to negotiate with the two people who have spent months plotting my destruction? Mrs. Dalrymple stepped forward, her elderly face stern with disapproval. Rory Veldon, I have known you since you were a child, and I am deeply disappointed in your behavior. This is insane, Wesley protested. You can't just ambush people like this. Actually, I can. This is a public accommodation. These are willing witnesses, and you two called this meeting. I stood up and faced the small crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the happy couple who have been conducting their affair in this very room for the past 6 months. Val's camera captured every moment as the reality of their situation hit home. Rory began crying, but these tears seemed genuine for the first time in months. Wesley looked like he might be sick. Now, I continued, I believe Wesley and Rory have something they'd like to say to everyone. The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Rory finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. We're both sorry. We made terrible choices and hurt a good man who didn't deserve it. Louder, I said. I don't think everyone heard you. We're sorry, Rory shouted, her composure finally cracking completely. We had an affair, we lied about it, and we tried to destroy Beck's reputation to cover our own guilt. Are you happy now? Getting there, I replied. Wesley, did you have something to add? Wesley looked around the room at the faces staring back at him, then seemed to deflate like a punctured balloon. I'm sorry, too. We were wrong, and Beck didn't deserve what we did to him. Thank you both. That was very enlightening. I turned to address the witnesses. I think we've heard enough. Thank you all for coming. As the group began to file out, I heard Val already uploading the video to social media. By morning, the footage would be circulating throughout our entire social circle. Rory and Wesley sat in the shabby motel room, their secret exposed and their reputations in ruins. They looked at each other like strangers, the excitement and passion of forbidden love replaced by the cold reality of mutual destruction. This is what consequences look like, I told them as I prepared to leave. This is what happens when you underestimate someone and assume they'll just accept whatever you dish out. I paused at the door for one final observation. You wanted to play games with my life. Now you get to live with the results. The video of Rory and Wesley's confession went viral within hours. By Thursday morning, it had been shared across every social media platform and forwarded through email chains that reached far beyond our immediate community. I watched the view count climb from my office computer, feeling a satisfaction that was both profound and complete. Comments poured in from people I hadn't spoken to in years, offering support and expressing shock at the revelations. Janet from HR called me into her office again, but this time her demeanor was entirely different. Beck, I owe you an apology. We clearly misjudged the situation based on incomplete information. No harm done, Janet. We all make mistakes. The company would like to offer you a promotion to senior project manager, along with a substantial raise. Consider it our way of making amends. I accepted graciously, though the promotion felt less important than the vindication it represented. Word spread quickly through the office, and by lunchtime, colleagues who had avoided me just days earlier were stopping by my desk to offer congratulations. Wesley, meanwhile, had disappeared entirely. His apartment was vacant, his phone disconnected, and according to office gossip, he had left town without telling anyone where he was going. Rory was hanging on by a thread. The investigation into her expense account had uncovered thousands of dollars in fraudulent claims, and her termination was a foregone conclusion. Her social circle had evaporated overnight, with former friends distancing themselves from the scandal. Friday evening, I decided to celebrate at Murphy's bar with Marty and a few other friends who had supported me throughout the ordeal. The atmosphere was festive, with drinks flowing and stories being shared about the spectacular downfall of Rory and Wesley. "You know what the best part is?" Marty said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. "They did it to themselves. All you did was make sure people saw who they really were." "Sometimes that's enough," I agreed. The celebration was interrupted when Rory burst through the bar's front door, her hair disheveled and her clothes wrinkled. She looked around wildly until she spotted me, then marched over with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Beck!" she shouted, loud enough to silence the entire bar. "We need to talk." "I think we've said everything that needs saying, Rory." "No, we haven't. You've destroyed everything I worked for, everything I built. My career, my friendships, my reputation, all gone because of your petty revenge." The bar patrons were watching with fascination, phones emerging to capture what promised to be another memorable confrontation. "I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "I just revealed what was already there." "You manipulated the situation. You set us up." "I documented your choices and made sure people knew about them. There's a difference." Rory's voice rose to near hysteria. "I want you to fix this. Call off your dogs. Tell people it was all a misunderstanding, something." "Even if I could do that, why would I?" "You made your choices, Rory. Now you get to live with them. Because I'm your wife, because we have history, because somewhere deep down you still care about me." The bar had gone completely silent, everyone straining to hear my response. I stood up slowly, looking at this woman who had shared my life for over 2 decades, and felt nothing but cold indifference. "You stopped being my wife the moment you decided to humiliate me publicly while carrying on your affair. You stopped being someone I cared about when you tried to destroy my career to cover your own guilt." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You want to know what I feel for you now, Rory?" "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant when she realized that her power over me was completely gone. The tears started flowing again, but this time they had no effect whatsoever. "You're heartless," she whispered. "No, I'm done. There's a difference." Rory looked around the bar at the faces staring back at her, phones recording her breakdown for posterity. The weight of her complete social isolation seemed to hit her all at once, and she crumpled like a house of cards. "This isn't over," she said, but her voice carried no conviction. "Yes, it is." I raised my beer bottle in a mock toast. "Trip's canceled, Rory. So's your future." She turned and fled from the bar, pushing past curious onlookers who had gathered outside to watch the spectacle. Through the window, I could see her stumbling toward her car, completely broken and utterly alone. The bar erupted in cheers and applause, with several patrons buying me drinks and slapping me on the back. But I found myself staring out the window at the empty parking space where Rory's car had been, feeling a sense of completion that was both satisfying and hollow. Marty appeared at my elbow with a fresh beer. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think I am." "Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. 23 years of marriage, reduced to a public spectacle in a dive bar. A woman I had once loved, destroyed by her own choices and my methodical documentation of them. "No," I said finally. "No regrets." I watched her go, the queen leaving her ruined kingdom, and raised my glass to the empty air. Some endings don't need a sequel. The game was over, and I had won completely. But as I sat there, surrounded by celebrating friends, I realized that victory in a game like this doesn't feel the way you expect it to. It doesn't bring back the years of deception, or erase the humiliation, or restore the trust that was broken. What it does is provide closure. The knowledge that actions have consequences, that people who underestimate others do so at their own peril, and that sometimes the quiet guy in the corner is the most dangerous person in the room. I finished my beer and prepared to go home to a house that was finally completely mine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and a future that belonged entirely to me. But tonight, I was content to sit in Murphy's bar, surrounded by friends who had stood by me, and savor the taste of justice served cold.